Hello fashion lovers, welcome to my channel. This is Anna's Glam Attire. If you're new to this channel, please do well to subscribe, press the notification button to get notified anytime we post a video. On today's tutorial, we're going to be talking about how to draft a basic bodice. So the measurements you'll be needing for drafting this particular pattern is the bust circumference, your waist circumference, your shoulder measurement, your nipple to nipple point, your under bust measurement, then your under bust circumference, then also your waistline measurement. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to do is to mark out a line, and this line you're going to mark out, you call it your guideline. This guideline is of your desired length. There is no standard measurement attached to it. Then the next thing I'm going to do now is to place my points, the points that I need for me to create this bodice. And the points that I need for this is the bust point, the under bust point, and the waistline point. So the first point I'm going to get now is my bust point, which is 10 inches. Then the second one is my under bust point, which is 13 inches. The third one I'm going to get is my waistline point, which is 16.5 inches. Then I will connect the line. I'll make it the point to be a straight line. I'll mark a straight line with those points that I've created or that I've marked out. I'm marking a straight line with those points that I've gotten. So I'm done making them a straight line. The next thing I'm going to do now is to label them. This is going to be my BP, which is my bust point. This is going to be my UB, which is my under bust point. This is going to be my WL, which is my waistline point. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark out my shoulder measurement. My shoulder measurement is 15. I'll divide it by 2 and it will give me 7.5. So I'll place my tape here close to the guideline. Then I'll mark out the 7.5 inches like I'm doing. Then the next thing I'm going to do again is to mark out my neck length, and my neck length is 3 inches. So as I've marked it, I'll mark my neck depth to be 3 inches as well. I will now connect these two lines. I will connect this line, this point and this point with a curve. See the way I'm doing it? I've already connected it. Then the next thing I'm going to do now is to bring down my shoulder line to a point and I will stop. Then the next thing I'm going to do now is to come down by 1 inch from that guideline to my shoulder line as I'm doing. The reason for that is because our shoulder is not straight. So because it's not straight, all you need to do is to give it a slope. So I've sloped it down. The next thing I'm going to do now is to mark my chest line. And to get my chest line, I will divide my bust circumference by 6 and then add 1.5 inches to it. And after doing my own, what I got is 7.5. So I will mark 7.5. See where I placed my tape. This is where my tape is, and I'll mark that 7.5 here. So as I've marked it, I will now connect the line like so. So as I've done this, I will now bring down the shoulder line to meet with the center line, with the chest line, sorry, and I'll label it to be my CL, which is my chest line. So the next thing I'm going to do, guys, is to mark out my armhole curve. And to mark out my armhole curve for the front part, I'll be coming in by 0.75 from this shoulder line, and see, as I'm doing it, this is 0.75. I came in by 0.75, and at the chest line I will also mark out my bust circumference, and which is 9 inches, for me to be able to get my armhole curve. And listen, guys, some people might be confused. Why is it that every time they talk about bringing in 0.75 inward when you are drafting a front pattern, a front bodice? The reason for that is for you to eliminate excess fabric that will bulge out at the armhole after joining the sleeve for the front part. And as well, you have to have it at the back of your mind that the front part has we have our breasts fixed in front of our bodies. Yes, our front pattern, we have breasts, our bust circumference. That is why we included the bust circumference there. That bust that you see there, if you make the armhole to be like the back armhole, it will not really relax. So for you to get the armhole to sit perfectly and have a good finishing at the end of your garment construction, you have to come in by 0.75. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark out my nipple to nipple measurement for my dart creation. And my nipple to nipple measurement is 8 inches divided by 2 is 4. So I will mark out my 4 inches from my bust point, not from the chest line, from my bust point line, this line. Then I'll mark it down to my waist line, like I'm doing. Then this is my waistline. I will also mark the 4 inches there, and I'll connect the lines together like so. As I've connected the line, the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark 1/2 inch here and 1/2 inch at this side, so as to get our darts. So I'll place my 1/2 inch on top of this line, which is my nipple to nipple line, to get my measurement. I marked 1/2 inch at this side, and I'll also mark 1/2 inch at this side. See how I'm placing my tape. If you check our previous video on how to read a tape, you understand exactly what I'm doing, because I don't really need to place it or start teaching how to read a tape at this class as well. You can kindly visit that particular tutorial. It will help you a lot while you practice pattern drafting. So at this point, bust point, I will come down by 1/2 inch because I don't want any sharp edge when it comes to my bust point. So from that bust point, I will come down by 1/2 inch, and that's where my dart will now start from. So from this point, I will connect it to this line, and the same thing here. I'll connect it to this point. I will do the same here and the same thing here. Watch as I do it. I'll place my ruler at that 1/2 inch which I came down from the bust point, and I'll merge it with the 1/2 inch I have also created at the sides, at the under bust and at the waistline. I will repeat the same process here. Okay, so as I've done this now, the next thing I'm going to do is to bring out or mark out my measurements. So my bust circumference is 9 inches. I'll mark 9 inches here at the bust point, and the dart is not actually on the bust point line, so I will not replace any measurement. I will now bring in my allowance, which is 2 inches allowance. I want to use 2 inches allowance. Then at the under bust line, I have it to be 8 inches. Then I'll mark out 8 inches here. Then the darts that I have 1 inch darts here. I'll replace it back to this place. I'll replace my 1 inch here. Then I will now add my 2 inches allowance. Then the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark out my waist circumference. And my waist circumference, I have 8.5. I will now mark out 8.5 here. Then my dart here is 1 inch. I'll bring back that 1 inch here. And the next thing I'm going to do is to mark out my allowance, which is 2 inches. This is my desired allowance. I don't know for you. Anyone you want to use, you can use it. You can use 1.5. You can use 2 inches. You can as well use 2.5. It's just your desired allowance. So this is what I have at the end of it. This is for my front bodice. This is my front bodice pattern. So I will cut it out. While cutting this on your fabric, you have to add some allowance, maybe 0.5 allowance. You not cut it as exactly as it is. You add a little allowance like 0.5 to it, half-inch allowance. Then you will now cut it on your fabric, as not to omit any sort of allowance. So I'm done cutting for the front part. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to cut the back pattern. So for this back pattern, I will replace those lines that I've created there the way I've created it there at the front pattern. So remember, the first thing we did is to give out a guideline. Please, at the end of this tutorial, anywhere you find any difficulty or you need clarity, comment on the comment section. We'll attend to that message as soon as possible. I will make it crystal clear, even if it means for us to private chat you and give you a one-to-one online teaching. We'll do it. So the next thing we are going to do now is to bring back those lines that we have created here. But before we do it, the back will have a zipper allowance, which the front did not have. So I'll mark 1 inch because I want to use 1 inch for my zipper allowance. As I've marked my zipper allowance, The next thing I'm going to do now is to mark my half length, which is my waistline point, from my shoulder to my waistline point. So from my shoulder to my waistline in front is not the same with the back. For the front I have 16.5, but for the back I will have 15 inches. So I'll mark 15 inches for my waistline at the back. Then my under bust line, I'll bring it out as 13 inches. My bust point will be 10 inches as indicated. So I'll also repeat the same thing I did for the front. Okay, I will now label it. This will be my bust point, this will be my under bust point, and this will be my waist line. So I'll mark out my shoulder and my neckline here. My shoulder is 15 inches, which is 7.5. Then my neckline, I used 3 inches, if you remember. Then my neck depth, I'm going to be using 1.5 inch. Then I'll connect the 2 points with a curve. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to bring down that shoulder line to a point for me to get my shoulder slope. I'll come down by 1 inch like we did at the first pattern making, and I'll connect it to the neckline tip, the peak of that neckline as seen. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark my chest line, and my chest line is 7.5. If you are confused on how we got our chest line, is that bust measurement divided by 6, then plus 1.5 inches. Then I'll mark my chest line. So the next thing I'm going to do now, after labeling it, is to bring down that shoulder line to meet with the chest line and then give it a curve. I'm now bringing down my armhole curve here. Then the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark my circumferences. My bust circumference is 9 inches. This is 9 inches. I can as well do it at the chest line. This is 9 inches. For me to be able to get my curve, and you see that where I placed the curve is the right place I have to place it. Then the next thing we are going to do is to bring out our dart. Our dart is nipple to nipple point divided by 2 is 4 inches, but this time around for the back piece we are going to be starting from the chest line to the bust point to the under bust and the waistline. Then we connect the lines together like so. So the next thing we are going to do is mark 1/2 inch at the both sides. We'll start from the bust point to mark the 1/2 inch. Okay, then from this point, from this chest line point here, I will connect the dots. Okay, so as I'm done doing that, the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark out my circumferences. So my bust circumference is 9 inches when divided by 4, and then at this point now I'll mark out that allowance that I have here and place it back. So the dart I have here is giving me 1/4 of this tape, so I'll still bring in that 1/4 here. Then I'll add my allowance, 2 inches allowance. Then at the bust point I'll still repeat the same thing that I've done there, but here is going to be different because that allowance here is bigger than the one at the other part. So here I have 1 inch. I'll place 1 inch back here, then my 2 inches. Then the next thing I'm going to do is for my under bust circumference. My under bust circumference is 8 inches, and the dart that I have here is 1 inch, so I'll place back the 1 inch here, and at the same time add my 2 inches allowance to it. Then the next one I'm going to do is mark out my waist circumference, which is 8.5. Then I'll mark out my dart, which is 1 inch, and 2 inches for my allowance. Then I'll connect all of them together. So I'm done connecting. The next thing I'm going to do is to cut it out. So I'm done cutting. This is the back basic bodice pattern. So let's bring it together for us to understand what I said at the initial stage. If you look at this, back pattern, it's not actually aligning with the front. Are you seeing it? It's not aligning at all with the front at all. So the next thing we are going to do now, for here to align with the back part, we have to minus anything that created the difference between the front shoulder to waist point and the back shoulder to waist line. So here now, the shoulder to waist line of the front part is 16.5, and the shoulder to waistline of the back part is 15 inches. Is 15 inches. So if you minus 16.5 minus 15 inches, you should be getting 1.5. So from the bust points, we'll create a bust dart as to make these points, these are two patterns to align at each other at the sides. So this is the bust point. So from this bust line now, I will come down by 1.5 inches. This is 1.5 inches. I will now connect it to the bust line like I'm doing. So as I've connected it here, this place will be off for us to get the bust dart. So all we need to do here is to remove this bust dart, fold it in the way I'm doing for you to be able to align it to the back the way it should be. Have you seen it? If I remove that bust dart, I should be getting this. But I believe the only thing that will make you understand what I'm saying more is when you practice. And when you practice it, that is when you have more questions. And we are here to answer all of them. All of them. So see it. It will align if you eliminate this bust dart. This is the excess that you will get at the end of the day. So thank you all for watching. Please subscribe if you're a new member. Subscribe to it. If you're a new person, subscribe to it. Then press the notification button so that anytime we will post a video, you will be notified. And also give us press the like button. It inspires us. Yeah, it motivates us to do more. Thank you very much. See you in our next tutorial. Bye bye.